The scene is set.
Eucalyptus.
Invasive albino king snakes.
Emerald ash borer and its parasitoids.
The world's largest amphibians.
The invasive species that is humans. I'm Kirsten.
And I'm Nicholas. Welcome to the Anthropocene.
Right. Hi, Becca. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
This is definitely an unofficial intro because I still have to do the actual intro. But this might be like bonus material or something like that.
That sounds good to me.
But now that we're on the spot, I can't be funny. It's impossible. I have way too high of expectations.
It's leaving my body right now.
Right. No, we're all in like peak health from the state of it. I got 4 hours of sleep and had a pickle for breakfast, and I'm running on a monster that, half of a monster that I found in my bathroom that was already open.
That's disconcerting.
It was open yesterday at some point, probably.
Probably.
Yeah, it wasn't like, it was still edible, drinkable, potable, whatever the proper term is.
Either way, you drank it, so, and here you are.
Right, yeah, and I'm not the one with food poisoning.
I am the one with potential food poisoning. I woke up this morning very sick. Also, after I got like one of my sick foster puppies out of the hospital, and the other one is still there. So it's been a week, fam. But she's here sleeping beside us, chilling. So she's doing okay.
You can be sick together. I'm
not.
We were. I just bring a rash. That's all I have. I last night was playing a murder mystery game, and of course, if I'm a detective, I have to have a mustache. But I'm allergic to the adhesive, so I have a mustache, and I'm rocking.
A mustache.
Yes.
Becca and the mustache.
Yeah, it's my band.
Must you? I must rash.
All right. So yeah, I'm still so excited to be here. So,
Right. Yeah, I'm stoked. This could be a long one, or it could be short. I'm not entirely sure. But we'll kind of
be long.
Yeah, I mean, like, because you've got so much stuff, and I read through it quickly, but I didn't want to because I knew I was going to start formulating things that I want to say, and I kind of want to be just responsive to what you're saying in the moment. Same with Kirsten,
awesome.
So she can responsibly throw up when she needs to.
This information may make you throw up just from sadness, let alone the food poisoning. So,
oh God, just wait till we get to the question and answer portion. There are some heavy questions in there.
Oh God, okay.
Yeah, which don't feel like you have to answer. There's 10 questions. One of them is my own, and the one I asked is personal, but not in it's you might want to share it, and it's a good thing.
Oh.
But you also just might not want. We'll get to it.
We'll find out.
And then there's also some other ones that are just possibly depressing that you don't have to feel like you have to answer. But then some people ask some really nice stuff. So
the topic is really depressing, so I'm prepared to talk about all the depressing things today.
Right? Is that wine?
No, this is coffee.
Okay. I was like, it's 9 a.m. here. I know it's 10 a.m. there, but
the topic's so depressing. I actually had to start with wine.
I thought it was a wine glass.
I don't have a normal. I didn't want a full glass of coffees, and I like it because it says "Best Cat Mom Ever," and it has this little cat flicking everybody off. So that's what I drink my coffee out of. It makes me feel empowered.
Oh, maybe I'll have to get a custom Best Bug Mom Ever.
Oh, that would be
with
arguably
6
better.
middle fingers.
Yes, even better.
All right, so are we good? You guys want to start?
Yeah, I think I'm done complaining about ailments.
Oh wait, no, actually before we start, because I'm gonna inevitably at some point geek out about this. This is not related, but one of my life goals has been to breed tarantulas. And I have a rare species that's a purple pink toe, and I paired her twice, and she made an egg sac, and it is due to be pulled from the cage this Monday on Valentine's Day. And she just keeps walking around and kind of showing it off to me, hey, look what I have. So,
oh my God, that is fantastic, and also super depressing because a spider has a better love life than me on Valentine's Day. So on that note,
I mean, shit all for her. She wouldn't have anything if I didn't play the matchmaker here. But yeah, we brought in a male from another place, shipped him in. We called him Derek the Stud. I don't know why. We just had to give him some sort of name. But
Derek survived.
He did. She wanted to kill him at first. She was not into it. He was like drumming really hard, and she turned away from him, and then like spun around really quick. I thought she was going to kill him, and then she just started punching him in the face with her like reciprocal drum.
You and me and you, both of us together. That, right? Isn't that the same?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's out of our.
Right on. Okay, you guys want to start for real?
Yes, yeah. I just missed
Awesome.
the very end of Becca with her tarantula. Just that she was punching him in the face, but then they made it, and now she has.
I made a joke about spicing up your sex life, about punching your boyfriend in the face. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, okay.
That's pretty much it.
And about Becca finding you a nice Derek from the south.
Yes. I found him on
Nicholas.
Tinder.
A ferret?
Derek.
Oh, Derek.
She
Yes.
said the spider's name was Derek. You said you had a bad love life, and Becca's a matchmaker, so
Right,
maybe she
we didn't
can
need to
find
bring
you.
that part back up. Thank you.
Yeah, I found him on
I was gonna
Tinder.
leave this in as the actual intro, but I'm probably gonna cut that part out. All right,
All right.
let's do
get
it.
started. Yeah.
Everybody shut up but me. Okay. The scene is set. The sound of tires on the pavement creates a hum that envelops the car as you drive down the winding road towards your childhood vacation spot. This time with your own hands on the wheel. The radio turned down, you gaze through the crystal clear windshield out at an expanse of nature as it is muddled together in a sea of green that washes past your car. You pull up to your campground, the very same one you stepped foot in almost 20 years ago. Much has changed since you were a kid. You can see through the forest to the lake. The canopy has opened entirely as well. A moment of absolute silence, interrupted by nothing. No cars, no people, no birds chirping, no frogs croaking, no insects buzzing. Just silence. Absolute silence. And hello, nerds! Welcome back to another special episode of the Anthropocene podcast. As you know, every episode is special because I don't do them with any sort of continuity at all. The shared experience that both Kirsten and I have is usually enough to get us through most episodes. However, occasionally we do like to yield most of our time to some real experts in their fields. And today is absolutely no exception because it is my absolute pleasure to welcome back Becca! Hello!
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so happy to have you back.
Yes, we're so excited that you came back after the first time, and then we still had technical issues this time. But hey, we're getting better.
Hey, that's okay. I don't mind the technical issues. I have a lot of fun talking to you guys about everything, even though this topic is kind of depressing. We will make the most out of it. So.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a great place to start with depression. I'm going to be honest, when we have you here, it's like one of my favorite things about the podcast is having like special guests like you on it. And unfortunately, it does mean, though, also that it's probably about to get pretty depressing as far as like ecology goes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that kind of comes with my territory here. So I bring the depression with me when it comes to these insect topics. I care about it a lot. I swear by the end of this, you will be feeling better, but the beginning's going to be a little rough.
Right. Cool. What a roller coaster of emotions. I'm excited. Yeah. So last time you were here, we talked about the emerald ash borer and the parasauroloid wasp specifically. But this time we're going to kind of open it up to be a little bit more broad because obviously as an entomologist, you must study just an obscene diversity of things, or just have an interest in an obscene diversity of things. Because I as an ecologist, someone who studies plants, animals, soils, hydrology, all of that stuff, you probably know more topics than I do just in like invertebrates alone, which is something that I always am just immensely impressed by whenever I talk to an entomologist. So yeah, I guess we're going to kind of talk about like not just, insects, but arachnids, crustaceans, mollusks, and every other type of invertebrate that people are colloquially referring to as bugs, which is kind of going to bring us into our first question, because we need to set some ground rules here, or some ground expectations for this conversation, because obviously two of us, well, actually, no, one of us, is myself, is not super, I guess, familiar with like the entomological world. So when I refer to all of these things, to the general public, I tend to just group them all in as bugs. If I'm specifically referencing one, I'll say this is an arachnid or a crustacean or whatever, But for the general public, it seems that they kind of, refer to everything as bugs. And as we know, there is Hemiptera, which is the actual bugs, right?
Yep, that's right. So I feel like the further I venture into this career, the more I'm struggling with being like very specific and also not being specific enough because my audience changes so much. I will be talking to actual entomologists who do colloquially use the term bugs, even though we know it's not technically accurate. And I think part of that comes down to the fact that it's easier to communicate to the public when you're kind of talking on their terms. Yes, bugs technically belong to the order Hemiptera, and that's what makes them true bugs. They have to have a piercing sucking mouth part called a stylet, and that includes things like stink bugs, water striders, and plant hoppers. But personally, I think the term bugs is a cute word, and I think all bugs are cute, so I'm going to call them bugs. And also, it makes it a little easier to talk about things just because, like, I like insects and I like arachnids. I like a bunch of different types of invertebrates, and so it makes it easier to talk about these interests without being like too wordy with my audience.
Right.
As soon as I start using bigger terms with a more general audience, it can kind of shut them down because they may not understand what I'm saying. So I don't see a problem with the term bugs. I honestly kind of prefer it, but I do call myself Bug Girl Becca, so I'm a little biased.
Yeah, you made that bed. You got to lay in it now.
Yep.
I think that's a great point, which is we'll kind of get off topic because I'm here, so that's just the standard for this podcast. But basically what you just said is evidence that you're a great science communicator, because I think a lot of times we get like hung up on the elitism in science, and like the general public especially sees scientists as these like unattainable, like insanely supposedly flawless, I'm doing massive air quotations right now, people that are unapproachable because they just know so much they're unable to communicate it at like a quote unquote dumbed down level, which I don't like that term for obvious reasons, because it just means that somebody's not as well versed in that specific area of expertise. It doesn't mean that I'm dumbing it down. It just means I'm explaining it at a more basic level just because somebody hasn't taken the time to put that level of knowledge into their head. And I think that if you really truly do have an understanding of something, you're able to communicate it to both PhD students and, experts in the field, but also a 5-year-old who just really likes bugs. So I think that your ability to do that and your willingness to do that shows that you have a very adept understanding of the topic at hand, which is why you're here and which is why I'm not doing this episode.
Well, thank you. I do really appreciate that. I feel like, and this, I think pretty much every entomologist kind of shares this feeling. I feel like I know very little about insects and bugs in general, but there's just so many of them that I think that that's going to be a feeling that perpetuates throughout my lifetime. And honestly, I kind of like it. I like that I don't know everything about them. That's what's so exciting about insects. They make up the dominant terrestrial animal, and yet we know about 1% of them, basically. Like, that's so strange. I don't know. So I just, that's what's exciting to me about insects. I love that even though I might not know very much, I still know a lot, and there's so much more to learn.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know, like, I'm an ecologist just working right now in like a entomology project, but I have these interns and they'll be like, hey, like, what is this? And I'm, no clue. And I think like the first little while they were so kind of like, why is this lady like teaching us stuff? But then I think little by little they just come to realize how much diversity there is and how difficult it can be. And yeah, I mean, I just focused in a little bit the last year into ants a little bit. And so now I'm like, sometimes I can, look at something and know the genus. And it's like other times it's like, I don't even know if this is an ant. Like,
it's a great point that you're bringing up, just because, like, for example, I really couldn't tell you very much about ants. I know basic overtones about ants. I know general knowledge about ants, but I could not tell you ants really to genus. And, I wouldn't say I don't know about insects, and I wouldn't say that you don't know about insects. We just know so very, all of our knowledge about insects is so varied because there's so much. And that's why, like, when you meet an entomologist, they usually have like their specialized area of entomology that they have to study, because there's no way that I could learn everything about insects. I wish. I really do. My brain's not that big. So I think
speak
that
for yourself.
Well, come on, Nicholas, you got to learn every single bug. I want to see that by next year.
Okay, so we should quantify it then, right? Because obviously, for people who don't know or haven't Googled it just now while we were on this, just in insects alone, there's like an estimated 5.5 million species. And that is not including like all of the other invertebrates that we mentioned earlier. So your arachnids and your crustaceans and all that stuff that people refer to bugs. For reference, there are only 7.7 million species of plants estimated to be on this planet. So if you take all of the different species of what we consider to be our quote unquote bugs, then you actually dominate a higher percentage of life forms on this planet than plants. So that's what we're dealing with. And that is why entomologists just physically can't learn all of that stuff. And when I said speak for yourself, I meant like, I believe that your brain is big enough. If I learn like 7 orders of bugs in my lifetime, I'll be pleased with myself.
Right. That's still good. I mean, I think any knowledge that you can pick up about insects is good, because everybody has experience with insects. And that's also why I like bugs so much. My field is really easy for me to connect with other people, because every single person has had some sort of interaction with an insect or some sort of bug, whether it be good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Most people obviously view them as bad. You know, insects and bugs in general kind of have this poor reputation as pests or inconveniences to people in general in their homes, but they've all had some sort of experience with them, and that makes it really easy to connect with the public and then kind of shift their focus and get them to start to realize that these are very important animals, just like they're big, charismatic megafauna. They're both important.
Yeah, see the previous episode.
Yeah. I think they're cute, but they're still equally important.
Yeah. I don't think we're video recording right now, but for reference, she's referencing the absolutely beautiful collection of different insects and arachnids behind her.
Well, thank you.
So unfortunately, you guys don't get to see that. So if you want
clip.
to, just join our podcast, I guess, be another presenter.
Mm-hmm. Or just reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk about my bug room at any time. I finally counted, and I have like 80 different spiders and different insects in here. So
yes, love it.
That's amazing. Also, if anybody like wants to be one of our first members on Buy Me a Coffee, then we'll start releasing video recordings. So.
Yeah, buy me a tarantula.
I would love that.
Okay, so fun and games are over. It's time to get sad.
My safe word is pumpkin. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I mean, that shit just stings. My safe word is pineapple juice.
Okay. So we do have to talk about this. As much as I would like to avoid it, it's a really important thing. It's what, personally, as somebody who has zero really official experience in the entomological world. Entomological, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. Yep. Just as I thought. I can see that the global, I guess, global bug collapse is one of the like legitimately most terrifying indicators of how we're affecting the planet. And like we said, we don't have time to talk about the collapse of every single species of insects or arachnids or whatever. So we're going to be talking about it a little bit more in a general sense. But we are going to sort of tackle it in different sections and try to make it as attainable as possible given the time frame of what we have for this podcast. So since we'll be discussing the declines of insects in a very general sense, we'll also be maybe talking about the decline of arachnids and things like that in passing or just in reference, because if you follow Becca on Instagram at BugGirlBecca, you know that there is a possibly preference for arachnids, but that's just one man's opinion.
I'm just a little biased toward them.
Right.
How can you not be? They're like the puppies of the insect world. Like
they're fuzzy.
Sorry, Nicholas.
I mean, they're so cute. They are fuzzy. They are large. They're charismatic. They're colorful. They're beautiful. I could go on for forever, but yeah, the spiders are the best. Anyway,
Just like a peach.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're fuzzy, they're beautiful, they're charismatic.
Forbidden
and you can
peaches.
They make
So-
you win.
We basically need to first start off by addressing the different issues that are causing the global decline in insect populations. Obviously, there's too many to address because we, as humans, we're really good at just having an absolutely multifaceted attack at every trophic level. So we're gonna make this a little bit more attainable for everyone. And honestly, even before we get into all that, we should probably put the global species decline into perspective. So I guess this is where, Becca, you can take the wheel and kind of kick off this episode as I slowly slip into a sobbing puddle of madness as you explain the true extent of the global decline of insect biodiversity.
Well, okay. First of all, I wanted to say that I currently work on the research of emerald ash borer biological control. And so this information is not from my own research, but a collection of papers that I found through the Xerces Society. And if you don't know what the Xerces Society is and you care about insect conservation or invertebrate conservation in general, I really want to recommend that you look them up. That's their entire mission, and they do a lot of great work for conservation. Regardless, this topic is really near and dear to my heart because insect decline doesn't just mean that we're losing bugs, and I obviously love bugs and care about them, but it means that we're going to lose life as we know it. It's not something that is a separate issue from us. Without insects, we do not have the lives that we are used to. We don't have the fruits and vegetables that we know, and it will cause extreme life shifts and changes, and we're already seeing that with the pandemic, so we don't need to make our situation worse. So let's dive into the nitty-gritty details.
Oh boy.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say, why should we even care about arthropod diversity losses? I mean, who cares if we lose some bugs, right? Generally, people don't like bugs. They're thought of as pests or nuisance and potential threats to our children, crops, and homes. But regardless of whether or not you like bugs, they are vital to life as we know it. The vast majority of bats, birds, and freshwater fish depend on insects. And we humans depend on insect pollination for the fruits and vegetables we use to feed both of ourselves and our livestock. Insects also contribute significantly to nutrient cycling and competitive interactions on plants. And these services provide a value of like $57 billion to the US economy. And that was a conservative estimate from 2006 for just the US alone. In today's dollars, I think that's closer to 70 billion. And that's a conservative estimate. So these insects really provide such vital, financially important services to us that we really cannot live without. So I also wanted to say that this research is a little bit controversial in the fact that, like, obviously there needs to be more research done because we don't know a ton about insect abundance. There are so many insect species that we have not actually described. I think that we've described 1 million. And where there's an estimated 5.5 to 6 million species. So we have a lot of work to do.
Understatement.
So, but the work that has been done really provides compelling evidence that insect abundance, diversity, and biomass are in decline.
Yeah, you're actually totally correct there, by the way. If you adjust for inflation, 57 billion in 2006 is approximately 78 billion in 2021. And that does not include any increased value that's associated with the services provided by inverts.
Right. And that was a conservative estimate. I think it's much higher than that.
Oh, so. I would imagine that because a lot of times too, when you get those estimates, it's like quantifiably what affects us directly, and oftentimes it doesn't encompass the indirect effects or the cascading effects that invert benefits have, because we put everything in this quantifiable money thing because go capitalist America.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that, but we only have described such a small portion of insects that are out there. And so I don't feel like we really fully understand the services that insects provide. We've only scratched the surface. So we don't really know what will happen when we lose these species that we haven't even described yet, because we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the reason that insects are so biodiverse to begin with is because they fill so many different ecological niches. And I think we could really take a lesson from insects. Insects have it right. Wherever insects seem to go, biodiversity flourishes. You see a biodiverse plant community, biodiverse insect community, and then anything that relies on those insects or those plants pollinated by insects will then continue to be biodiverse. However, wherever humans go, it seems to be the opposite. I mean, think about it. There's only one human species left. And we seem to just continue to destroy biodiversity wherever we go.
Yeah, listen. We fucked up.
Not understanding that that is the thing that allows us to live these convenient lives that we have strived for over the course of our evolution. So, yeah.
I know, yeah, like you were saying that this is really controversial. And there's some people that, you know, really get uppity about this whole like insect collapse because there's quote unquote like not enough research into it. But even just anecdotally, like, do you guys not remember being a kid and how covered in bugs your windshield was compared to like today, like 10
No,
years?
I have far too much trauma to remember my childhood. I'm kidding, mostly.
Memories of like when I was a child, like my mom would be driving to my grandma's farm and our windshield would just be covered in insects, or like the monarch migration that would happen in the area that I was growing up in was huge. And compared to today's numbers, I mean, you barely see the number of monarchs that you would when I was a child.
Yeah.
And that anecdotal evidence is global.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just the US, which is also terrifying.
One of the most, like, if I get questions about insects in any capacity or inverts, it is either monarchs or lightning bugs. I did a whole video for the park district regarding, somebody asked, why don't I see lightning bugs anymore? Like, I don't see them. And I can't tell you how many times I'm driving in a car with somebody during the summer and they're like, man, you just don't see lightning bugs anymore. And people just, that's usually the end of it. Like, they don't think more critically about it. And I think that's a huge issue, is that people do notice a lot of these things, but they just don't really consider the consequences of what that means or like how significant that is. But the antithesis of that is people are noticing, which is frightening because people are generally aware of virtually everything nature related. I have many a time watched middle-aged white women walk feet from a family of deer talking about how Kathy was at the store the other day and did you hear what she did, and not noticing these deer feet from them outside. Like, Susan, the unawareness people have of nature is ridiculous. So to see everyday people referencing the insect decline is something that is, I think, the potential to be a really beneficial tool for more conservation efforts, as sad as it is.
Well, and it is anecdotal evidence, you know, that's not hard science, but it's still important, I think. If we're all noticing a phenomenon like that globally, there's something more to it. Insects didn't just disappear. They didn't just decide, nah, we're not going to live here anymore, or there's going to be less of us conveniently.
Right. We have ruled this planet for pretty much all of its existence. We're just we're gonna leave with the dolphins.
Yeah.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
And I think that's honestly a huge part of this. The fact that the public is starting to notice is both sad, but it's also exciting because the public is noticing, and that's where we can start to really make this change. That's the whole mission of the Xerxes Society, is to engage the public in community science efforts to then actually make the changes that they're recommending in terms of insect conservation and biodiversity. So, for example, the Xerxes Society has an entire firefly initiative where they work with the community. And you can get involved with a lot of these different projects if you visit their website. They have one for fireflies. They have Bee City USA, which is all about are working with cities and urban areas to incorporate habitat for native bee species. There are lots of ways for the community to get involved, which is great. So if you are noticing these things and you are concerned about losses of insect biodiversity, then you should get involved, because you might not think that you can do a lot individually, but you really can. That's where it starts.
Oh, love that.
Well said.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is why we're here. Right. So what's next? I mean, should we get into the...
We can get into the numbers.
Oh, boy. The numbers. What do they mean? We're screwed?
Yeah. When I get into it, you're just going to be sad. I'm just going to say that right now.
I'm an ecologist, Becca. I'm always sad.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like that's the worst part about being a scientist who works in like any sort of ecology or entomology or like wildlife conservation nowadays, because every day you are faced with the impending doom of our planet, which is really hard to remain positive.
That is a fair amount of weight on the shoulders of a single scientist. Luckily, we have our networks, but I mean,
right. I think we all feel that pressure a lot because it's hard when you know you're working so hard for your planet and to conserve it, but there, as much change as you can make individually, it still needs to be a global effort. So,
agreed.
Yeah. All right. So let's go into these numbers. Declines in insect diversity and abundance are apparent in studies including faunal and biomass assessments, as well as like reviews of key indicator species like butterflies or charismatic individual species like the monarch. So while the loss of certain at-risk species like the monarch has been anticipated and is ongoing based on habitat loss, among other stressors, the situation is potentially much more serious. Recent reviews have revealed declines across multiple continents that transcend the loss of individual species in terms of functional and ecological impact. So to dive in, let's first discuss dangers to specific species, genera, or orders of insects, and then we'll expand to kind of overall biomass. And for those of you who do not know, biomass is just the weight of total mass of organisms like in a given area or a volume. So for those of you who don't know, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, creates a red list of threatened species, and the goal of that list is to assess these species for risk of extinction. For invertebrates, less than 1% of the known species have been assessed by the IUCN. So obviously that informational gap that I was talking about before is very evident already. But of that 1% that has been sampled, approximately 40% of them are considered threatened. That's terrible.
Yeah.
So almost half of the 1% of the species we've sampled are threatened for invertebrates. So for example, 28% of the assessed bumblebee species in North America are threatened, 41% in Mesoamerica, and 23.5% in Europe. That's just bumblebees. And I also want to make a quick aside here. When it comes to honeybees, they are not in danger. They are a managed species. The biggest threat when it comes to bumblebees is moving them across large distances and spaces and then bringing diseases to native bee species. Honeybees will be okay. They are a managed species. We will continue to protect them. So when I'm talking about threats to bees, I am not talking about honeybees.
We did a whole episode on honeybees this season and how we consider them to be invasive species, in fact.
I agree with you there. And I'm not saying that they don't serve their purpose. They are absolutely important.
Within their own ecosystems?
Yeah. That being said, they are also hugely problematic when it comes to bee conservation. So native bee conservation.
Episode, whatever that episode was.
Yes, go learn more about the bees. So some more studies, like for example, in the United Kingdom, they did some studies over 10 years and they were assessing butterfly species. And 52% of the butterfly species have declined in abundance at their monitored sites, and 47% of butterfly geographic range was reduced.
Good Lord.
So half of the butterfly species declined in abundance, half of the range of the butterflies was reduced. That's horrible. We're still a program monitoring butterflies in a region of Belgium found that 19 of the original 64 indigenous species had been extirpated from the area. And trends for European species have also shown a much higher proportion of species in decline than those that are increasing. There are places where insect diversity is increasing. They're usually managed areas or restoration areas. So I'm not going to say that overall there are no trends of increasing insect biodiversity or biomass. But overall, the trend is largely declining. Declines have also been severe in areas highly impacted by human activity, which is not surprising. And places like that would be like industrial, agricultural landscapes. But insect declines are not restricted to farms and they're not restricted to suburbs. For example, fewer butterflies have been observed per year at elevations in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California that are high enough to be removed from most of the direct effects of development. And repeated surveys in protected forest areas in Costa Rica have found declines in entire genera of tropical moths. So even in these places where human impacts are not direct, the decline is still there. And that's largely because of the things that are affecting these decline, which is mostly habitat loss, pesticide use, and climate change. And I cannot understate enough the effect of climate change. We will go into that more. But to me, climate change is going to be the thing that threatens our insect biodiversity the most.
Well, two things. One, maybe we should have all gotten wine before this 9 a.m. podcast.
I know. It's so sad already.
Two, I think one thing also that makes studying inverts really, really difficult is a similar thing that I've noticed with birds and their populations and stuff, is that they can fly. Introducing that ability to a group of animals, like obviously not all, but in general, there's like a significant amount of, I don't know if you would necessarily call them migratory, but animals with the ability to move through a significantly further distance than one that is terrestrially landlocked. So that also adds this, bees, for example, it means that they have, such a larger range that they're present in, that they can be affected by so many different factors, not just within a single ecosystem, but within multiple. So if one ecosystem's healthy, they'll go to another one, and that one could be the one that causes their decline. And yeah, that's just something that I don't think is often encompassed in a lot of not necessarily studies, but like in our understanding of things, just because it's very difficult to understand the effects or the direct effects that are, caused by these different habitats and the different stressors that these different habitats have.
Oh yeah, I would completely agree with you. I mean, it's really hard to say exactly what stressor is affecting a certain species in a certain habitat. And I think part of that is because it's not just one stressor.
Mm-hmm.
And every habitat can be so varied in terms of what extremes you're seeing. Like maybe one habitat has a lot of runoff from agricultural landscapes and is full of pesticides, and it's directly affecting freshwater invertebrates. Whereas another habitat maybe is north of that agricultural landscape. They're not getting that pesticide runoff. Regardless, though, that is only one part. And so people really have a hard time wrapping their head around how like an insect that can fly might be going to these different habitats and picking up different stressors from all of them. And just like a person, that adds up. I mean, you keep adding stress to a person, eventually they're going to break. And the same thing occurs with these insects. They can't handle it.
Yeah.
They're not prepared for it. They did not evolve for this.
Right. These little fuzzy boys have this like insane, I guess the buzzword would be bioaccumulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use bees as an example because that's pretty much my only area of understanding as far as like any sort of bugs go is the bees because of pollinators. But like you've got the neonicotinoid herbicides, which are affecting these populations. Now, I think that like typically people are always worried about the colony collapse within, the European honeybees. But I'm looking at this from a standpoint of, for example, the 500 native bee species just present in Illinois alone that are being affected by these neonicotinoid herbicides that affect their ability to navigate. And so that bioaccumulation it may just be one area or two areas that are completely separate from each other have enough to cause that sort of negative impact on a bee. But if it flies to those two areas, then it's enough that it can just absolutely kill off a population and therefore affect neighboring populations. So bioaccumulation is terrifying.
It's terrifying because imagine like that bee flies to a different habitat. Let's say there's a cute little crab spider on a flower and it sees the bee and it eats it. Well, of course, that bioaccumulation is just going to get greater as that predator ingests those neonicotinoids and pesticides. And then something inevitably will probably eat that spider, and then it just continues to travel upwards. And we also eat, wild game and things like that. So to pretend that it doesn't affect humans is naive. It sounds great to be able to use a pesticide and just target a specific insect and have your crops be taken care of, but it.
Hey, little post-episode voice note here for you, taking after our idol, Ali Ward from Ologies. I love her style. Anyway, there was some weird technical difficulties here while Becca was going on talking about bees in her awesome way, and we totally lost it. So I'm so sorry. But essentially, everything that she said is back in our episode Honey, Don't Be Like That, where we talk a little bit about Apis mellifera and them as invasive bees, and that the fact that we need to protect and do everything that we can to protect our native bee populations, and that honeybees are actually managed livestock and we don't have to worry about them. They are not in danger of extinction, and everything's going to be okay for the honeybee. So root for your native bees. That's what you want to pay attention to. And if you guys want to learn a little bit more about honeybees, just go ahead and go back to that episode and learn some more about that. So sorry about the technical difficulties. We love you guys. Thank you.
Becca, but it hated that.
I guess Daddy Simplocarpus is okay.
How is that? Why is Bedbug Becca not okay, but Daddy Simplocarpus? Well, I just said Simplicarcus also, which is terrifying, but also
not inaccurate.
No,
yeah, it does smell like rotting flesh.
Right? See, I'm on to something here.
Right. Out of context, people are like, what the fuck goes on in the background of these? It's exactly what you think. A bunch of nerd shit. All right. So should we move on to talking about the next depressing topic regarding biomass?
Yeah, we probably should.
Yeah, I don't want to, but I do.
Yeah, well, I think biomass is such a useful tool because, again, it's just total mass of organisms in a given area. So it's a great way to kind of measure insect loss without being very specific. And that allows us to get just a kind of general overview of trends rather than like investing into very specific science, which again is really difficult since we know so very few insect species. It requires a lot of effort to be able to study one because you need to know so much about its life cycle, and that can take years to be able to design good experiments off. So the biomass is a really great tool to be able to measure this. That being said, reductions in total insect biomass in when I was practicing, sorry.
You practiced? Oh God, we're so flattered.
I can't. Sometimes, do you ever have this problem? Just different aside, when you read, where you like you just can't say the word anymore.
Yep.
Every single episode ever, like.
Oh, good. That's normal. Because I was trying to say homogenization yesterday, and I kept saying homogeneation, and I was like, "What am I saying?"
Right, but your brain's like, "No, just say it right," and your mouth's just like, "Nope."
No, literally couldn't do it. So I was trying to say decadal?
Decadal?
Yeah.
Decadal? I think either one's acceptable.
Multi-decadal.
Acceptable.
Okay, multi-decadal. I'll say that. Okay, redo. Reductions in total insect biomass in multi-decadal studies are similarly being reported from different parts of the globe. So, for example, a 33% reduction in the abundance of butterflies was observed over 21 years after extensive monitoring in Ohio. One state. Total flying insect biomass decreased by more than 70% across 63 study locations over 27 years in Germany. And there was a more than 10-fold reduction in arthropod biomass that was observed from 1976 to 2012 in a resampling study from a Puerto Rican rainforest. So that is a terribly alarming trend to see that much loss of biomass.
In such a short period of time?
Yes, a short period of time in a small area.
Yeah.
That's not a huge area to sample. 63 study locations, I mean, that's still that's a lot of effort, but that's really not that much space. So to have a 70% decline in biomass is terrifying.
Gosh.
And of course, there are criticisms to these studies, but the overall trend is clear that broad geographic range is perhaps the most dire feature of this crisis. Mm-hmm. It's not just the US, it's not just Mesoamerica, it's not just Europe, it's the globe. Assessments from all continents except Antarctica reveal declines. So declines have not only been observed among species with narrow habitat requirements, so for example, like the monarch really requires milkweed, but it's also among those that are broadly distributed and abundant. So for example, the migratory monarch butterfly, since we're going to have to talk about that. Everyone knows the monarch.
The what?
The who? What is the monarch? But the monarch has captured a lot of public attention, and mostly that's because of its startling population declines. Severe reductions in monarch populations overwintering in Mexico and California have documented over the last few decades, and is primarily attributed to changes in land use. For example, the monarch population that overwinters along the Pacific coast has declined by more than 99% compared to the 1980s.
Lord. Aren't there only a few because that's the Pacific monarch, right? No. Yeah. And that one's declined to only just a few thousand individuals or something like that?
Yep. Over 99% of that population has declined. Every time I think about that, like, I just want to cry.
Yeah, that's horrendous because that's a flagship species. That's like the one that like pretty much everybody cares about as a standard. So
Exactly. Like a species that it is so charismatic. People know it so well, and there is so much conservation effort into it. And regardless, we're still seeing this decline. And again, that's because most of this really comes down to habitat loss and climate change.
right. So I don't know if you go into more detail about it, but I guess this is just a question I'm posing right now, but would you consider the fact that monarchs for their migration, it takes multiple generations? Like I think for the standard monarch down to Mexico, it's that migratory does it take like 4 or 5 generations to complete just one iteration of the migration?
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about it that way, then they're moving over a massive area of land over multi-generational. This is a multi-generational migration, which means that if just one generation is affected, then it has that direct effect on the subsequent generations, making the effects exponentiated in that regard, I suppose.
Yes, exactly. I mean, think about, for example, let's say there's, a monarch who is traveling up the coast toward Canada for the summer, and she lays eggs. Let's say
Can you hold on one sec? I'm sorry. The AED is just beeping at me, and I'm afraid that my mic is picking it up. So I'm going to move it and not get electrocuted, or try to.
Well, yeah, please don't get electrocuted. That would be horrible if that's just what we all witnessed right here, right now. Yes, it is 3 to 4 generations. I had to look that up. I was not sure if I was talking out.
I was too afraid to move it.
Too afraid to move it? Oh, I haven't heard any beeping though. If that makes you feel better.
Okay, yeah, it's like it's also just distracting me because it's like kind of continuous every once in a while, but it doesn't seem. It seems like it's not frequent.
Well, that's good.
Okay, you know what? The cotton tank top and flannel look was kind of my thing. So one of us is gonna have to change. We can't be wearing the same thing.
Sorry, I had to change out of my sweater. I just vomited out like a liter of water. But we're
right on, cool. So now that water won't distract you.
Yeah.
Cool. So shall we get back to the monarchs?
Yeah, monarchs. I'm ready.
Hold on 1 second. I feel so bad.
I'm leaving this in. I'm not editing this out.
Everyone feel really bad because
I want everyone to know how dedicated.
Right? Yeah. And unless you accidentally shit yourself, Becca. I'm leaving it in.
Yeah.
No sharks.
So far, so good. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I don't remember exactly what I was saying with them, but
the monarch female lays eggs.
Yes.
Well, like, say for example, a female monarch lays her eggs and those caterpillars hatch, but that milkweed, for whatever reason, was treated and those caterpillars die. Maybe 1 or 2 of them live. That is a huge decline in their progeny, and then that trend is probably only going to continue. So think about that for every single female monarch is enduring this like kind of bottlenecking of there's less and less caterpillars, less and less adults. And over time, you're just going to see, the decline that we already are seeing, that 99% decline. It's terrible. And especially for people living on the Pacific coast, I can't imagine having this beautiful phenomenon that you get to see these wonderful migratory species. And then just over time, there's less and less of them to the point where you'd barely even see them. The same thing kind of happened with the rusty-patched bumblebee, which used to be widely distributed between the Midwest and Northeastern United States, but it's declined by more than 90%, and that's likely also due to disease and pesticide use. That actually became the first bee in the continental United States to be protected under the Endangered Species Act. But like I said, it's not just these well-known species like the monarch or the rusty-patched bumblebee. It is a much larger issue, but these very well-known species are good for us to kind of give the public a general idea and get them to be concerned. Because most of us have seen a monarch. If you live in the United States, you know what they are. And like, I remember very distinctly as a child, we used to have this trampoline in my backyard. And every summer I would stand on that trampoline and the migratory monarchs would come through. And all I had to do was just stand there and put my arms up and they would land on me. It was so magical. I have never seen anything like that when I go back to my hometown now. I don't even hardly see monarchs. And it's depressing. It is.
Well, I know here, like, talking about people that, aren't really into bugs, like my husband, for example, in Ecuador, he used to hate bugs. I've made him, pretty appreciative of some. He leaves the spiders now in the house, and I'm very proud. Anyway, there's a shout out. Love you, honey.
Awesome.
You go, Francisco.
But there are these Scarabidae beetles here in the Andes. They call them catzos, and they're huge. They're like an inch long, like they're massive, and they would all kind of come out at the same season, and people actually eat the larvae. I've had it once. They barbecue it like on a little pincho. The texture's weird, but the flavor's good.
That's what I like. That's kind of all of it. Like, the flavor's not bad if you can get through the texture.
It's really like buttery, actually. Like it's good. I think also just like they also have the
Did
heads
anyone
on
just hear
them
my
still.
stomach growl after that?
I didn't hear that.
But they used to come out in hordes, and I mean, Francisco was saying that it was so weird that he's like, where are all the catzos? Like, because they all come out like seasonally, they all pop out of the ground, and then they're adults like running all over the place. And now you see some, but it's just another example of and a huge beetle, right? Like something that's so
you would definitely notice that you're not seeing it as often.
But soil things are so sensitive to especially the climate change aspect, because their whole life cycle is so dependent on temperature and water, and so they just get really screwed up when things are moved even a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later too. But the climate change aspect, those impacts are, I can't understate them enough, because even just small temperature shifts can have such a huge effect, because they are subjected to that. If they're in the soil, they can't escape it.
Yeah.
Kirsten, I think you just brought up a really good point that is something that we did that I don't think we have plans to talk about. And correct me if I'm wrong, we can talk about it later if we do, but you brought up insects as food. And I think that like we have listeners from like 10 different countries. So like, at least. So like, I know, it's a humble brag. Other countries are like heavily dependent on insect for food. And we've stated how many times now that this is a global issue. And if people are having trouble relating it to themselves, and because it's a lot of times it's indirect effects that amount to these massive effects on human populations. Well, here's one very specific direct influence. If insect populations are in decline on a global level, then that means that food is in a decline on a global level, not just indirectly from the pollination and stuff, but from the people who legitimately consume insects as like a staple dietary need.
Well, and not only that, but think about the impact of pesticides then too, because then people are directly eating pesticides.
Yep, that is direct bioaccumulation,
right? Which is not obviously a good thing, and that is hard to measure because, like we said before, pesticides can be spread around so easily, and so at that point, it's dangerous for these people to consume insects in some capacity. But also, I'm so glad you brought the entomophagy up in general, because part of our big issue is that approximately 40% of our global land is used for agriculture, and then people live separately in urban and suburban areas. However, we exclude insects usually from our ag landscapes. And if we incorporated insects into our agricultural landscapes, we can not only provide habitat for them, but we can also provide additional food for ourselves if, especially in America, we just start eating insects. It makes sense. Entomophagy is so common in pretty much every other part of the world, but America, we are very hesitant when it comes to eating insects, and yet they're a great source of protein and they're incredibly sustainable. So just want to throw that in too.
I feel like everybody gets over this, or like the people who have an aversion to it are like, I'm not putting a tarantula or a cricket or a grasshopper in my mouth. And it's like, you don't put for the most part, you don't just stick like a pig's face in your mouth when you're when you're consuming, or like you don't eat a chicken's head or whatever. Like I mean, you do indirectly in a McDonald's chicken nugget. Who knows what's in there? It's one of those things where it doesn't have to be a direct consumption thing. It's just a staple ingredient within something that makes the food more sustainable. It's not like you don't have to directly be eating tarantulas out of a can.
No, and honestly,
Though I would.
I'll tell you right now, I would have a hard time doing that. Obviously, I keep tarantulas as pets. I view them differently.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to eat every insect, but I'm so glad that you brought that up because, for example, there are things like cricket flour, which is that could be a huge staple of your diet. You're getting protein, you're using insects for flour. Like there's not as much agricultural land being used to create that. That is a great way to kind of shift and use entomophagy in your diet. Another way that you can do that is simply like, for example, with the cricket flour, I've made like Chex Mix and cookies and different things for outreach events. And I'll have one with insects in it and one without. When it's cricket flour, you cannot tell the difference. It doesn't affect the taste. And so if you're really perturbed by the idea of eating these insects, there are alternative ways to incorporate them into your food without directly being like, oh, there's a cricket leg. Like, it's not
Right. Yeah.
I feel like people view it weirdly as like heathenistic or something. It's not at all. I mean, I guess if you want to just pick up like a wild, big grub and bite into it, like Bear Grylls, you could. You don't have to.
Well, I know in Canada there's a line of products that are like chips and cookies and a bunch of things.
The bugs, they're delicious, by the way.
Yeah.
I highly recommend them. If you want, like, because they're chips, a lot of them are chips. Let's say I'm a snacker. I like to, snack. You want to snack and you want to do it in a healthy way, do the Eat Bugs cricket chips because they don't taste like bugs and they're good for you. I will say they're a little dry, so you need a lot of water. But the flavor is awesome, though, and they're good for you.
Right. And as it becomes more socially acceptable and as like a societal standard, it'll get better because people are putting more effort into learning what makes it taste good.
Right.
And then
like
once you get...
It's only
that's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Like if you asked me how much I liked vegan food maybe like 15 years ago, I had a fair aversion to it because most of the time, unless it was prepared like very specifically, like I just didn't really, it wasn't delicious.
Right.
Now, some of my favorite food is vegan and it's like incredible all of the vegan substitutes and stuff that they have to do, that they can do. And like,
right. Because they've worked on it.
It doesn't taste any different than regular food.
Exactly.
It's
10 years ago, vegan cheese definitely tasted more like cardboard,
Yes.
Today, that's not the case. And that's because they've worked on it. So the same thing, if we start shifting toward entomophagy and we actually start incorporating that in our diet, it will become more and more delicious as we learn to work with it. I'm just saying. I want to plug that. I really, really, really vouch for entomophagy. I think it's cool.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
You don't need to be like, oh, cool. Like, let me just pick up this grub and slurp him down like you're in the Lion King. You could.
Right.
You have to. I've done that.
I used to eat roly-polies as a kid.
Oh.
As it turns out, I believe they contain cyanide, so it's not recommended.
I actually didn't know that. I would imagine.
I think I read it somewhere because I brought this up. I bring this up more than I should. And somebody was like, yeah, no, they're because like people learn random things. Like, for example, like armadillos have leprosy. Like It's one of those random facts where I'm pretty sure pill bugs contain like a small level of cyanide or toxin that's not good for eating. To me, they just tasted like celery.
I keep them. I have a whole cage of them that I'm looking at right now and wondering. I'm not going to eat them, but wondering. I know that some like millipedes carry cyanide, and it's very obvious. Like they call them, I think, cherry scented millipedes or almond scented millipedes, but they're beautiful and also they smell great. Except it's cyanide, but that's fine.
What? Oh my god, yeah, they're cherry. Oh man, I find them all the time, and you smell them, and you can smell they just smell like cherries.
Yeah.
And like I always am sticking them in people's faces when we're out like herping, and they're like, "I'm not sniffing that." I'm like, "It smells like cherries."
But it's cyanide. Yeah. This is a different aside, but I used to every summer go to this like plant hopper, tree hopper kind of aggregation of entomologists. And in the place where we stayed, there was lots of the cyanide millipedes. And I would go out and collect them while everyone else was light trapping at night. And I would just come back to our little campsite with like a handful of them. But this was prior to me finding out that they were full of cyanide. So I was like, they smell so good. And all the other entomologists were like, no, Becca, no. Which was a great way to learn and embarrass myself.
I cannot find anything to support the fact that isopods contain cyanide, so I think that somebody lied to me. But
that's
maybe they got
which
them
is good because
confused
I
with
ate a
millipedes.
significant amount of them as a child.
and you're okay. So hey, there you go.
Well, relatively speaking, yeah.
You're here. So
Right, yeah.
you're alive.
Exactly.
There you go. Oh my gosh.
So on that note, I think this is probably a good time to take just a quick break. And then when we come back, we can start talking more specifically about what's causing these declines and the different things that are happening. And then we can, of course, get to the happier ending where we talk about the positive things that we're doing and all that type of stuff and the good news.
Yes.
Hopefully there is some. Please let there be some.
There is good news. I promise there's good news. And there's so much that you individually can do. So don't feel helpless. I promise that there is a light at the end of this tunnel.
Perfect. So after the break, we'll start talking about that. And then we'll finish off the episode with a Q&A that our listeners and people who follow us on Instagram asked Becca. So we'll see you soon.
Hey guys, it's Kirsten. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. Just coming at you with a quick break here to talk about our affiliate link with Buzzsprout. Now, I love using Buzzsprout. It is a really super awesome platform for your podcasts. It has a bunch of really easy, super easy to use tools to help you upload your podcasts, make an awesome show notes, put a page for your hosts, have a cute little website, and then you just go ahead and upload and it sends it to all the directories. Now in our show notes here, you'll see our affiliate link. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, please go ahead and use that. It helps support us. And then as soon as you start your paid subscription, you'll get a $20 Amazon card and you can also start your podcast. I also want to mention if any of you ever have any questions about how to get started or what is some good things to do, or what you know, if you're just like nervous about starting your own idea and want to chat about it, please reach out to Anthropocene Instagram or to myself or to Nicholas's account, and we love chatting with you guys. So we will be there to answer all your questions, and if you're thinking about starting that up, go ahead and use that link. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the episode.
We're doing great.
Yep. Holding it together.
Right, welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Sorry, I found some chocolate kisses on my desk and
Ooh, snack break.
I'm glad everybody's here
destroyed.
still to listen to the positive at the end, that you guys haven't bailed out from some of the doom and gloom, but we're getting there. So
Yes, we are on our way toward some happier times. It's gonna be a little bit, but we're almost there. Just hang in.
Right. So you'll probably only need one more glass of wine to get through this episode.
Yes. I've definitely been drinking wine this entire time too.
Well, it's 10:30 now, so it's 11:30 there. It's a Saturday.
Right? Oh gosh. So I guess now we should probably talk about what is causing this decline. And we've touched on it a little bit throughout the episode so far, but really we should start kind of diving into the nitty-gritty details of why insects are declining. So, despite the great diversity of ecologies and life histories that are represented by insects from different regions and habitats in the world, we're seeing patterns that point to primary drivers of insect declines, and unsurprisingly, the most influential factors are habitat loss and degradation, pesticides, and climate change. Nobody is surprised. But other factors, including disease, invasive species, and light pollution, also contribute to these declines. All of the factors I mentioned are complex. For example, habitat destruction includes not just habitat conversion, but also homogenization associated with invasive plant species. So, for example, if an invasive plant species moves in and it outcompetes the native plants that are there, it's going to cause the environment to be homogenized to the point where it's not going to support a diverse insect community. Fragmentation also leads to this problem. Like habitat destruction, though, climate change is a multifaceted problem, and it involves not only shifting mean conditions, but also increasing environmental extremes. And I think that is what is so important. We kind of touched on this when we were talking about soil invertebrates before. But these environmental extremes are things that insects are not prepared to deal with. And so if it's too warm or too cold, that could very easily kill an insect. For example, a recent study by Warren Price Graham Forstenhausler, I'm sorry if I butchered that name, And van der Waal modeled the distributions of multiple taxa under different climate change scenarios. And with a warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, 6% of invertebrates were estimated to lose at least 50% of their ranges. And I think right now we're at a warming of 1 degree above pre-industrial levels. So we're well on our way to at least 6% of invertebrates losing half of their ranges. Correct. That's terrible. And it gets worse. It increases to 18% of invertebrates at 2 degrees Celsius and 49% of invertebrates at 3.2 degrees Celsius. So if we don't address this climate change issue, we will certainly see extreme losses in insect and invertebrate biodiversity. And again, although there are research gaps in our understanding of the climate change impacts, it is clear that insects will need high quality habitat, travel corridors, and stepping stone habitats to be able to move across the landscape in search of new habitats and to be able to escape these environmental extremes.
Well, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I know.
And also, so as someone who doesn't really have a ton of experience with just inverts in general, as I've mentioned about 400 times throughout this entire episode, just so when I say something dumb, everybody understands that this is not my area of expertise. I always consider insects to be like these insanely tough and, you know, I mean, obviously, like, from a physical standpoint, like an exoskeleton is way more advantageous than having our stupid bones in our body. That was dumb on our part. But, like, this temperature change is something that I think me as an uneducated person would consider to be surmountable by most insects. You would think, like, if you were to just tell me this, like, yeah, that's manageable. Like, it is an extreme environmental change, not to like downplay that, but they just seem like these invincible creatures.
Right. And it doesn't seem like that large of a change in temperature either. But what you have to think about is that insects cannot regulate their body temperatures the way that we do. They don't have a say, basically. If it's too hot, they're screwed. Right. That's that. They can't sweat and cool themselves off. They die. That's what happens. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, in many ways, insects are very resilient. But if they're losing like up to 50% of their habitat and they cannot fly to more suitable habitat to escape that extreme, it will kill them. And just think also in terms of like energy and cost efficiency. It's very costly for insects to be able to fly or escape a certain habitat in search of a new one. It's not only in terms of energy, but also predators can then attack them if they're out in the open and they're changing their habitats or moving to somewhere else. And so that also adds to this pressure from these extremes. There's not really a safe way for them to escape them. There's nowhere to escape to. And when they try to, they're also going to be raising their body temperature by expending this energy, which makes them even more at risk and vulnerable for these environmental extremes.
Not to mention that, and this is the part where this podcast really gets its foothold, but they also have to compete with invasive species introduced into their own habitats. So they're not just
those stressors. So much. So it's not just habitat degradation and destruction. It's not just climate change. It's not just pesticides. It's invasive species. It's light pollution. It's fragmentation. It's everything. I think David Wagner coined it as death by 1,000 cuts. That's what insects are dealing with. It's not one problem. And maybe they could solve that one problem. Maybe they can evolve to adapt and change and overcome this one issue. But with everything else that's being thrown at them, they don't stand a chance unless we do something. I'm getting very passionate.
And I think
no, this is good. This is good stuff.
Okay. I think another thing too that people that don't know a lot about insects tend to forget is that a huge percentage of insects, their longest part of their lifespan is actually as a larval stage. So when they're either caterpillars or like there's a bunch of hemipterans that live underground, cicadas, periodical cicadas, like and a whole bunch of different like a bunch of moths and butterflies are only in their adult stage for a short amount of time to breed. So even flying, like quote unquote adult insects can't really move because a bunch of moths like come out, they find a good tree to sit on, wait for a male to come over, and they die as soon as they lay their eggs. So there's not even a chance of escape. And that's the same with like mayflies.
I'm so glad you brought that up too, because like, for example, let's think, maybe this moth emerges. It has 1 week as an adult. And if it emerges into poor quality habitat, That's the end of it. That's
not to mention that like the habitat that it emerged from could be completely screwed, because like I'm thinking like worms and the elimination of soil horizons in places that don't typically have worms, like for example like the northern Midwest and Canada, where like glaciation prevented the formation of worms, but now because of introduced worms because of fishing, I'm getting passionate, it's my turn. You've got this destroyed soil horizons, which makes for this completely unique and foreign ecosystem that is completely brought into their native habitat and destroyed that. So now you've got an inability for them to develop properly, but then also the reproductive issues that happen afterwards. So it's no wonder that there's just all, like you said, death by 1,000 cuts of pressures from every single level.
Yes. It's really, I mean, I know we were talking about estimates and numbers, but it's really immeasurable, the impact that all of these different factors have on insects. I still feel like even these estimates that we're talking about are conservative. I really feel like I know we do not fully understand the scope of this problem. And so if you're concerned, you should be doubly concerned, because it's probably not enough.
Right.
And that's the other thing too. It seems really daunting at this point to be able to fix such a huge issue. And like I said, I just want you all to hang in there, because it is doable. We do have the tools. We are seeing change in landscapes that we do manage and restore. We do see positive trends in insect biodiversity for a lot of those landscapes. So I want to remind you all that it is doable, but we need to act now.
And directly now, we need to get still more depressing before we can get to the positive aspects of things.
That's also true. So all of that is just a small portion of it, but something else that we really need to address is pesticides. There are a lot of direct and indirect applications for pesticides in terms of how they affect insect biodiversity and population declines. But the associations have been documented between stressors and insect responses, and they point to a causal relationship, even though the knowledge of the mechanisms that underlie them are imperfect. So, for example, negative non-target effects of pesticides are apparent on pollinator populations, even as the behavioral consequences of sublethal insecticide exposure on bee foraging are like an active area of research. So what I'm saying by that is we know a very small facet of the problem, but we already know it's a problem just from that small facet. And yes, there's ongoing research to figure out how else this is affecting like bee behavior or non-target species. But from the data that has been collected, we are aware that there is a negative relationship with pesticides on pollinators. But as a consequence of the imperfect knowledge, we cannot always say which stressors or interactions among stressors are more or less important in a given area for any one species. And that's kind of going back to that death of 1,000 cuts too. It's really hard to say like, oh, if we address habitat loss, we would fix everything. We might for some species, that might be the one thing that they really need, but it's not going to be enough for the complex issue that is this whole loss of insect diversity and this whole decline. But none of this is surprising given the complexity of ecological systems and the diversity of insects. That's why insects are so diverse in the first place. They occupy so many different niches, and as a result, fixing this issue is going to be highly complex. But that's also kind of exciting because it requires a lot of science collaboration from all different types of scientists, and then we get to work together to solve a multi-level problem in a way that could also restructure human life and make it better for future generations.
The world as we know it.
Yes.
Right.
We have to change the way we live.
Right. And I also think that this is I don't want to get too far into this because this is like something that I have a personal relationship with, because I do use herbicides, but I use spot application herbicides outside of the flowering periods so that I don't affect pollinators. Like I don't spray anything that's flowering, and also it's spot applications, so it's a direct application to the weeds I need to get rid of, and I also supplement it with mechanical removal.
And that's a great point to bring up too, because I don't want people to think that we need to completely move away from using pesticides. That's not really
right.
That's not. We just need to tailor the way that we use them currently to minimize the effects on pollinators and other invertebrates. Like Nicholas was saying, not applying pest or herbicides to flowering plants is a very easy way to do that. That's one way of many to kind of change your application of these herbicides in a way that will benefit pollinators.
paraphrasing a statistic that I have referenced before, but don't have directly in front of me. In the US, every year we use somewhere in the neighborhood of the same weight as 8 of the largest cruise ships ever made in pesticides every single year. And that might even just be herbicides. But again, the point isn't the direct numbers. The point I'm trying to make is we use so much, and the application methods are just
too general
to do it as encompassing and quickly and effectively as possible without taking into account the residual effects or the residual amounts of herbicide that are left over, because a huge amount of herbicide is done in runoff, and at the times they're applied, it affects all of the insects that it directly and indirectly affects. If we take more time and put more effort into developing better application measures and methods, then that would drastically decrease the amount of herbicide that was or I guess pesticide in general that was needed.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, we use pesticides to control pest insects, but I've been told, and I'm pretty sure I've read, but I don't have, again, this is ill-prepared me again, but essentially the more herbicide or pesticides we're using, the more we're having to use, because we're killing off the beneficial predatory insects that would typically kill off our quote-unquote pest insects.
Mm-hmm.
So then we're creating a positive feedback loop with negative results that results in we have to use more and more and more to keep up with the reduction of those predatory insects.
Exactly. I mean, it's like slapping a Band-Aid on a problem, basically. You're just going to continue to perpetuate the issue because you're not solving the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, getting rid of those beneficial insect species too, because a lot of these pesticides are not species specific. They're either targeted at certain orders or types of insects, and that's not very specific. So you're going to affect the beneficial predators that you would like to see in these agricultural landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, like you said, if we can tailor our methods for using herbicide and pesticides and reduce the amount so that we use it only as necessary, or we're not slapping this giant kind of fix-all method when it doesn't fix all, we're just perpetuating a problem. So if we can really alter our way that we use these herbicides and pesticides, we can see better results and still use them. We just need to really tailor the method. That is the problem. And get down to the root of the issue of how can we address these pest species without also killing just insects in general.
Right.
Which is hard. But also, that's where a lot of biological control comes in, and that's what I like to do.
Right. And we're going to spend a lot more money trying to make up for the absence of our beneficial invertebrates than we will trying to develop ways to save them and benefit us that way.
Right.
So,
because we're just putting ourselves in a financial hole, basically. In the future, when we need all of these insects to pollinate our crops and we've killed them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about, like, for example, they made those robot bees or whatever to pollinate flowers artificially.
And they suck.
They suck, and they're expensive. Yeah. So if we're trying to make agricultural cost efficient, this is not going to work in the long run.
Right. Sidebar. I can't fathom the mind of the people who are like, let's develop a bee robot before we just try and save the bees. Like, that's like where we're putting our effort and money is like, come on.
I know. Like, I mean, it sounds cool. It does.
Yeah, sure.
I would rather you put that money into native bee conservation, but
yeah, that'd be great.
I guess you could build a robot bee. Sure.
Yeah,
that's
good.
Definitely what we needed. Thank you so much.
And then we'll build predatory robots to eat the robot bees.
It'll all be robotic.
Everything, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think that's a good point that you brought up. Yes, in the long run, it's not cost efficient anyway, and that's kind of the whole reason we use pesticides to begin with, is to maximize our profit. And yet we're shooting ourselves in both of our feet, basically.
Woo-hoo.
Woo!
So, I guess we start to kind of transition into, like,
the good news,
better stuff, or like the statistics that lead to the solutions, right?
Yes.
So like our preventative measures, like what can we do? Is there things that like we have to, does it all have to be a societal level, or can we do things personally? Like what, give us a crumb of positivity. That's all we're asking for.
I will give you more than a crumb, actually.
Yes.
So get excited.
I'm really hungry.
Yeah, I know. You want to eat those pill bugs. Well, if we hope to curb the losses of insect diversity and the services that insects provide, society has to take steps at all levels to protect, restore, and enhance habitat for bugs across all landscapes, from wild landscapes to farmlands and urban hubs. That doesn't mean that you can't do anything at an individual level. It just means that for really dynamic change, it has to happen at a society level. But of course, society is made up by individuals, so there are things that you can do by yourself. Individually, the best thing that I think you could do is get involved with the Xerces Society. They completely operate on donations. And so just being a member of the Xerces Society and getting their, I think it's bi-yearly publication where they send out a bunch of I actually have them here. It's called Wings, and it's essays on invertebrate conservation. So you can stay up to date on what they're doing with the money that you're giving them, what projects that they're working on. And then if you visit their website, they also have, like I said before, a number of different community science projects that you can get involved with, which is their Firefly one, their Bee City USA, and just some overall insect biodiversity projects as well. They have a monarch project too. And so if you want to get involved personally by either, going out and sampling, and maybe you take pictures of whatever insects you're seeing and you submit it to Xerces Society, that helps. It does help. The hardest part about science oftentimes is actually data collection and finding people to pay to go do the work. It's labor intensive. It's not easy. Finding people who are skilled enough to identify them can be very difficult. But having the general public going out and taking pictures or collecting information like that and submitting it to societies like the Xerces Society is extremely helpful. It allows them to collect data without putting a ton of funds into it. And so they're able to get good information and also use their funds for more pressing matters like habitat restoration. On a society scale, though, what we really need to do is protect existing habitat. That's an essential step. So, for example, large connected natural areas, they can act as reservoirs for invertebrate diversity. So protecting these existing natural areas is really helpful, but that's not enough. Approximately 40% of global use for land is devoted to agriculture, and I think I said that before, but over 55% of people live in urban and suburban areas. So we have these giant amounts of land just set aside for agriculture and nothing else. And that's really not productive. So we have to think about our approach to agriculture and rework it, and also for working lands in general, to reduce our reliance on insecticides and maximize biodiversity. Also, roadsides, parks, urban gardens, and many other landscapes can provide important habitat for insects, so those should not be overlooked. And then other invertebrates and the large number of people in cities and towns can help protect and restore these resources. Another thing that's really important to think about is lawns. And I think you guys, I feel like you guys have touched on this before, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, we did the paint.
I think it's episode 2.
Paint in the grass episode.
That's right. Yeah. But lawns are a huge waste of space. There is no reason to just have a giant patch of grass. It doesn't make sense. So if you
grass that doesn't go to seed or flower.
Exactly. Sorry, I should have said that. But if you have, land and you have a lawn, convert it into native plant habitat. There are great books about this. I really recommend looking into Doug Tallamy's research. He talks a lot about how to modify your landscapes in a way that is productive for native species. And he actually was or is a professor at the university I graduated from. I cannot recommend him enough, especially both of his books. So take a look at him as well. And he can help you modify your own land to begin to see more biodiversity for insects and invertebrates just in your lawn, or your space alone. Don't have
right. And a lot of places, if you live in a place with a homeowners association where there's requirements and stuff like that, obviously you need to abide by those.
Right.
However, the good news is you can start different groups and interest groups and things like that to change those rules and regulations. They're not set in stone. Yes. Somebody actually just messaged me yesterday and was talking about an initiative in Louisville that they're encouraging more native plant restoration in people's yards. And a lot of people think that it just looks like weeds and stuff like that. No, there is native landscaping, and it can look incredible.
Mhm.
Even if you're just adding flowering native plants to your, your landscape beds or whatever, and you mulch in between them, that's far more beneficial than these non-native plants that don't provide the same, I guess, ecosystem services for our invertebrates that the native plants do, that they've evolved alongside of. So
Exactly.
just consider incorporating that. And if you do have the means, then it's really easy to maintain a native garden once it's established. It really is. They kind of self-sustain with minimal maintenance versus mowing your lawn twice a week in the summer.
Right, exactly. And also, you can start some community initiatives to be able to do that within your community group or whatever. So like if you have a homeowners association that's against you using your lawn that way, you could use I can't think of what they're called right now, but like the islands in the middle of the road. That's just
The median.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So like, for example, if you live in a community that has medians throughout the community, you can use that homeowner, or you can get together with your homeowners association, maybe make a community group and push to have that be a more natural landscape. And that can be also a nice community project for you all to get together and work on. And it's nice for your children as well. Children need to have access to native landscapes, to insects, to invertebrates, to nature in general. They need to be curious about it. It's something that they absolutely should be exposed to because it's where their food comes from. It's how they live their lives. And so for them to have that kind of access, even if it's just on a median, is better than nothing. And it also supports insect biodiversity. So it's a win-win.
Love it.
Okay, what else?
Maybe the freshwater ecosystems.
Oh, wait, no, I didn't talk about that. Yeah, we should talk a little bit about that.
Wetlands. So good.
Okay, so terrestrial landscapes, obviously it's important to conserve habitat on terrestrial landscapes, but it's also very vital to protect and restore aquatic habitat. It could be actually more important because most of our at-risk insect groups rely on freshwater systems. So there is a lot of initiatives by the Xerces Society to address freshwater systems. That's a very large bulk of what they do. You can also usually get involved community-wise. I know in our area near the Chesapeake Bay, we have a lot of initiatives for cleaning the bay and monitoring at-risk insect groups and invertebrate groups. So that's something you can also get involved with. But beyond protection and restoration of habitat, society as a whole has to reduce land use stressors, including the pesticides, the overgrazing, the invasive species, and spread of diseases to insect wildlife.
Yeah, we'll also have a link for the Xerces Society's site in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I really can't recommend them enough. That's where the bulk of my information comes from. They did a really good job at compiling a bunch of evidence and data to suggest the loss of insect abundance and biodiversity. So I wouldn't really be able to talk to you guys about this as in depth without the Xerces Society. And I don't work for them or anything.
Yeah, not a sponsor.
I'm not. I just really, they're an incredible organization. So I just can't speak highly enough about them.
Well, we do love to hear that. It's always good to have resources and provide resources to the listeners where they can go and, if they really resonate with something, then they can, participate more.
Right. And I think the nice thing about that society too is they're really aimed toward the public. A lot of other invertebrate societies are not. They're aimed at other entomologists and things like that. But like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, that can be kind of exclusionary for people who don't know science lingo. And so what I really like about the Xerces Society is it's accessible for anyone with any type of background when it comes to natural history or in the environment. So
would you say that those other societies that aren't necessarily reaching out to people and kind of keeping to themselves are introvertebrated or?
Yeah, I would say a lot of bug people are introvertebrated.
There it is.
Yep. You can follow me on TikTok at Nature Nerd Nicholas, where I stole that joke from my own TikTok. So
stole it from myself.
Yeah. So suck it, me.
Oh God. So I know a lot of this was really depressing, and if you stuck around this long, thank you. But there's good news. The good news
is a very short paragraph compared to the other ones, but there is good news.
I know it's a short paragraph, and that's because there's not really a lot of data or evidence for the good news. The good news is more of a kind of grand picture.
I mean, it is very difficult to quantify positive news because of change, because that's the end result of change. Right. So there is obviously existing things that have already been done and happened, but I see what you're saying. I'm being a dick, but like the good news packs a lot more potency than the long list of bad news, because that's something that we can look back on and reflect on, whereas good news is something that's positive and
we need
potential.
Yes.
Yes.
So
a new hope.
And the good news is that all species are worth protecting and preserving for their own sake. But the current crisis is much larger than individual species and rises to the level of losing key function in terrestrial and aquatic systems. So if we don't take action to address declines in insect abundance and diversity, we're very likely to face problems including food shortages because of pollinator limitation and things like that that will make previous challenges faced by human civilization seem tame. You thought the caveman had it rough? Well, if we keep down on this road, then we're going to have it even rougher, but there's good news. We can have a lot of hope because insects are resilient. Like you said before, Nicholas, you thought that they are. I know that they have a little bit difficulty when it comes to regulating their body temperatures and dealing with extremes. But for the most part, established methods in conservation biology and management have produced positive outcomes for insect populations. So we know that they can bounce back. And they're reasonable timescales of decades or less for these bounce backs. So if we start now, in a decade or two, we are going to see some really positive change, which is exciting. That's awesome. That's a very short period of time. So for insects to be able to kind of overcome these decade-long hardships in such a short period of time that's awesome. Can't understate that enough. Also, what's really important though is government and legislative action. So I cannot understate enough the importance of legislative action or just getting involved with your representatives for your state and letting them know that this is an issue that you care about and it's something that you would like to see them address. So for example, I think it was Maryland fairly recently banned the use of neonicotinoids. A lot of states are following that trend. You can write to your legislators and say, hey, like I would really like to see a decline in the use or a cap in the amount of neonicotinoids allowed to be used or something to that effect to get them to start thinking about it. And even a backyard or apartment balcony can be a great place to start when it comes to addressing this decline. You could have a nice little native flower basket on your balcony in your tiny apartment, and that would be a great stopover for the smallest of animals that we all depend on. So I know it sounds daunting. I know it sounds terrifying, but insects are resilient and so are we. And we can really make this work for the better.
Right. And there is data to support that like changes are being made. I can't speak specifically for insects because I don't have that, but a new study recently came out that as of right now, if we do nothing, we have committed to several meters of ocean level rising just due to our current impacts and things like that. However, that is if we just continue on our trend now. If we do anything more positive, we can reduce the amount of climate change that affects global sea levels, which is in some way related to obviously other impacts like insect populations and things like that, because it's just it's relative to climate change.
Right. And I mean, that's exciting. Even a small change could make a huge difference. As long as we change our behavior in some capacity, it will have a positive impact.
Right. And we are definitely seeing societal shifts towards conservation and understanding. I think the younger generations, even though they don't necessarily have all of the information on specifics of it, understand that conservation of nature is more important than possibly previous generations. I think that the access to information that we have in the world today is super helpful and can really start expediting the process of conservation.
I agree.
So we have all the tools. It is a possibility. We have the tools. We just need to shift to using them more effectively. And we're already engaging in that shift. So that's the good news.
Yeah, the good news really is that we're already starting to make the positive change. And we're going to see it years and years from now. You know, in the next decade, I think things will look better. And if we just continue to put more effort into that, it's only going to get better and better. So it's not all bad. It's just time is really the most important factor here. We have to act now.
Right.
If we continue to dig the hole, it's going to be a lot harder to bounce back from.
Yeah, but if you go out and dig holes, you will find cool bugs.
That is true. That's very true. I spent a lot of time as a kid doing that. That and flipping rocks. Woo! I was inexpensive. They're like, give Becca a rock.
What a great way to describe yourself.
I know.
I was an inexpensive child.
They were like, go outside. Cool. Okay. I got it.
That's actually a pretty good segue into yourself, because I did put up a Q&A on Instagram and I got some pretty awesome questions.
Oh, good.
And I think we can kind of just jump right into asking you them and having you talk about yourself.
Okay, cool. I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So the first question is, this one might be the most difficult one to answer, and I don't want to stress you out like a ton right off the bat.
I'd rather start with the most difficult, then get easier. That sounds better.
Okay. What is your favorite bug?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to hit me with that kind of thing. Okay.
Oh, I tried to warn you.
Geez.
As someone who doesn't have a favorite everything, like, you can be general. It doesn't have to be like a species by any means. It doesn't really even have to be in order.
Can I pick categories of favorite bugs?
Absolutely.
Easier for me. Okay. So in terms of individuals, my favorite bug ever was Dwayne the Flat Rock Johnson. And also, if you follow me, I have very sad news. Dwayne finally passed away.
No! Damn it! I thought the sad parts were over.
No, they're not. Dwayne passed away in December, just before Christmas. He was getting very old and aged, to the point where like his claws wouldn't work anymore, so I had to hand feed him, and finally he just kind of kicked the can. But I had him for years, I think over 7 years, and he was absolutely just one of my favorite invertebrates ever to interact with. I loved him. And for those of you who don't know, he's a flat rock scorpion. His name is Dwayne the Flat Rock Johnson, or was.
Tattooed on your arm, I believe.
He is. Now it's a memorial tattoo. But he's always with me. And then my other favorite individual bug is Buttons. She is a velvet spider. I love velvet spiders. I found out a couple years ago that I had been sleeping on a whole group of spiders that are totally cool, not just because they're adorable, but also because they have sociality, which is very weird for spiders. And I want to study spider sociality, so I really, really like them. As in terms of like an insect, that's my favorite insect. I think right now I'd have to say cicadas. I really love periodical cicadas. I think that's something that in the United States we don't understand how privileged we are to experience that. And having Brood X come out last year was something that I had been waiting for 17 years. I remember when they first came out, when I was a child. I think I was 7 or 8. And my dad was really supportive of my love of insects. And he took me to this state park, and there were so many coming out of the ground. I could literally do snow angels, but like cicada angels if I wanted to.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. And it happened like that again this past year when they emerged. And so my dad has since passed away, but I really enjoy the cicadas because it's a way I feel like I can connect with someone I love very much.
Oh,
that's so cool.
Well, that is a wonderful story.
Thank you.
So, the next question is, how did you get evolved? How did you get evolved?
I leveled up. He gave me an ice stone, and then
right. So, how did you get involved in entomology?
That's a great question. So, when I think a lot of kids start off with an interest in insects because you're just curious about the world around you, and insects are definitely an unavoidable part of that. Mm-hmm. But when I was 5 years old, I was at my grandparents' house and I was flipping rocks looking for bugs. Like I said, I was a very inexpensive child. And my great uncle, who was a botanist, happened to be there. It was the first time I met him, but he saw me flipping rocks and was like, you could make a career out of that and you could be an entomologist. I could not say that word because I was 5, but I was like, yeah, whatever he said, I'm going to do that. And from that point on, I decided I was going to be an entomologist. And I hit a lot of snags throughout my middle school and high school life. Every time there was a career day and I chose entomology, everyone told me that wasn't a real thing. And that wasn't a job, that even as a woman, that's a man's kind of field. I heard all of that. But I didn't care because I knew what I wanted to work on. So once I graduated from high school, I looked for programs in entomology. I went to the University of Delaware and studied entomology, wildlife conservation, and agricultural and natural resources. It was pretty easy to triple major just the way that they have their program designed. Yeah, I pursued that passion all the way to college, studied it for 4 years, and then got a job at the USDA right afterwards working on biocontrol. And that's kind of how I got my foothold in there. But I also like to do outreach and things like that. So that was something I started doing in middle school when I first got my first tarantula and my first scorpion. I started coming to my school and bringing them there to talk about invertebrates because no one really knew about them, which is really ironic, being a middle schooler and teaching your classmates about something that your teachers do not know about.
Right.
It's like the best origin story. I love it.
Yeah. But I also want to say, too, just a caveat to that, there was one teacher who taught this like environmental class, and they have like an insect collection that's a project for my, I think it was 6th grade or 7th grade. So he was really supportive, and he was the one that I got to do all my outreach with. Everyone else told me it wasn't a job. And since then, he's invited me back. I teach a whole entomology course for their sleepaway camp that they have. And we've incorporated entomology into a lot of the curriculum. And it's just, I could cry. I don't know. It just makes me so
That's
happy
fantastic.
to be able to go back and make that change in just my hometown alone. And get everyone excited about bugs. And also now that they know that that's a career choice, so that's not going to happen to them again. So.
That's awesome. People are going to think that these questions are planned with that. Like, you're prefacing the subsequent questions so well.
Oh, I am.
Yeah. The next question is actually, have there been any hurdles that come with being in a male-dominated field?
I want to say, first of all, it is, in a way, it's a male-dominated field in that, like, people in the positions of power are mostly men, but there are lots of women in entomology, way more than you would think. Of course, there are hurdles in terms of like sexism. That I think that's in any field, but of course in the sciences, it can be a little bit exacerbated. But I wouldn't say it's anything that I can't handle. That resilience can be really hard to develop, and I don't think everyone has access to that. I just, come from a little bit more of a privileged background in terms of my skin color, and so I have that going for me, and that adds a little bit to my resilience. But of course, for people of any marginalized group, it can be so much more difficult. And as a woman, I am part of that, but I don't feel I get the full brunt of it, I guess.
So I guess kind of like to expand upon that a little bit, the next question is, what advice would you give to aspiring entomologists?
Oh my gosh. Don't stop asking questions. Go outside and just grab bugs. I mean, don't literally grab them with your hands unless you know what you're grabbing, but go outside, collect insects, and bring them home and just go through field guides and start learning about every bug that you bring home. That is a great way to start, because I think part of entomology that is so daunting is when you first get into it, the language, it's like learning a new language. So giving yourself that kind of exposure before you start professionally studying it, either for school or whatever, kind of helps mediate the stress of learning about entomology. Other things that you can do are talk to entomologists. A lot of us are on Twitter. For whatever reason, entomologists really, really like Twitter. So tons of us there. You can also feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Like if you like a certain type of insect or bug, I can kind of point you in the right direction of people to talk to and get some experience with. Some of the things I wish I had done when I was younger, but I didn't know any entomologists or have access to them. So I didn't get this experience, but you can work usually as a high schooler in a lab. If you live near a college that has an entomology department, they'll take you for, basic research, and you're mostly going to be a cog in a wheel, but it's exposure. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be hugely helpful for a career in entomology, because the more experience that you get, of course, the better you will understand it. Also get pet bugs. Pet bugs are...
Get what?
Pet bugs. Pet bugs are good.
Pet bugs, not bed bugs.
No, not pet bugs. Don't get those. But I mean, when I was in the summer between 5th grade and 6th grade was when I got my first tarantula. I found her at a pet store. She was a giant chocolate golden so she was like the size of both of my palms.
Wow.
And I saw her and asked if I could see her, and they put her in my hands, which was not what I asked for. But then I was like, oh yeah, I need that. And I had
the pivotal moment.
It really was. I remember it distinctly, and I told my dad I want it, and he was like, okay, well, if we can convince your mom, you can have it. I spent the entire summer badgering my parents, reading everything I could about tarantulas, to the point where they just gave up because I wasn't going to stop. And once I got my tarantula, her name was Delilah, by the way, she was awesome. But I studied her every single day. I had a notebook that I kept with morning, midday, and evening ambient temperature, humidity, what she would eat, where she would be, what her behavior was. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but it was a really great way for me to kind of learn about a certain species or animal and then develop research questions for the future. So I want to study tarantulas, and a lot of my experience over time, just having them as pets, has kind of helped me develop research questions around that too.
Gosh, I love nerds so much. It just makes me so happy. When I wanted my first reptile pet as a kid, I presented my parents with a PowerPoint with well-researched information on the benefits of me keeping a reptile.
Hey, but that's great because it shows to your parents like this is something that you're actually very passionate about, and
it's not just like,
you know, I want a bunny and now I want one. Like it's not just that. Also, just a little caveat there too. Please don't get pet insects if it's just on a whim and you feel like you're not going to care about them in the long term, because tarantulas especially live very long, and it is a commitment. Some of them live over 20 years. So
yeah, and just because something's small doesn't mean it's less intelligent. Jumping spiders are super crazy smart.
Mm-hmm.
It's like any other pet. It's just a different type of pet. Right. So like it's got to be something that you're willing to take care of and commit. So do your research and do it properly.
Right.
And
next question.
Just insect husbandry can be so much more difficult because they don't give you like clear signs of stress the way that like cats and dogs and birds and stuff do.
So definitely do your research before you do it, but it is a great way to get some exposure, especially if you live in a more urban area and don't have access to natural landscapes with lots of insects.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Next question is, do you have a favorite story from the field? Or I guess it doesn't necessarily need, I think by field, they don't necessarily mean field science. They may mean like being in the field of entomology.
Yes, I definitely do. I have a couple. The one that immediately came to mind was the first time I saw a tarantula in the wild. I'll tell two. So this happened when I studied abroad in Tanzania. I wanted to see spiders and tarantulas the entire trip. And before we had gone, my professor told me that there's just not a lot of insects and spiders there, and I'm not going to see much. He was downplaying it because he knew how excited I would get. And then he also knew that if I expected nothing and saw everything, that I would explode, which is exactly what happened.
Amazing.
So we were staying the night with the Hadza, which are the last hunter-gatherer tribe, and it's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was beautiful. And I'm out with my headlamp looking for scorpions because everyone was concerned about having scorpions in their tents. So I was kind of scorpion checker. And I'm going around looking for scorpions. And I see movement out of the corner of my eye. So I turn my head and I look at this tree. And on this tree is this 4-inch baboon tarantula. It was beautiful. I literally just started sobbing. And somehow my professor knew right away that I found a tarantula just because I was sobbing. So I'm standing there crying, going, "You're so cute. You're so cute." And I don't recommend doing this, but I had no self-control and I touched it. And weirdly enough, it was super cool with it. So the first tarantula I ever saw in the wild was just like, "You are my friend." And that was probably one of my favorite field experiences. The other one is also in Tanzania. The first lodge that we stayed at was in the middle of Tirangiri National Park, State Park. I forget what they call them. Tirangiri Park, I'm going to call that. And you stay within the park itself. So around you, you can hear like elephants and lions at night, and you're not allowed to walk by yourself because like there are animals literally walking through the place. Like it is so beautiful. And I'm sitting there and I'm eating dinner and it's starting to get dark. And this is where I realized my professor had lied to me about the insects, because I'm sitting there and I can see there's a light in an open bar area where there's no like netting or anything around it. And the floor was white, but now the floor was black because it was covered in bugs. They literally would have to take a broom and brush all the bugs away. So I'm sitting there. I go to stand up and go look at that because I think I see a dung beetle, like an elephant dung beetle, and I've always wanted to see that my whole life. As I go to walk over there, someone walks up to me with a giant African millipede and just hands it to me. I look up, it's someone I knew from college who was not with us on that trip, who happens to be an entomologist. And then we both just proceeded to geek out and identify all of the bugs that we could find for hours. While everyone else was eating dinner, we just hung out in this open area while all the bugs flew in.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was the best. They had camel spiders, they had dung beetles, they had millipedes, they had different types of moths, these giant termites, different types of ants. Like I had never seen any of them. And that night for hours, I saw a new insect every other minute. It was amazing.
So cool.
So that's probably my other favorite field story. There are ones that are
Rightfully
not as
so.
beautiful where I've gotten attacked by things or had a harder time, which are probably funnier. But
well, we could save those for next season when we have you back on, right?
I'll tell you all my embarrassing field stories then.
Perfect. Yeah. Next time is Bug Girl Becca 3 Embarrass Becca.
Yes, perfect.
The embarrassing. So the next question is, and I left this in because I had to leave one funny one in. Who is your favorite presenter and why is it Kirsten?
I really value Kirsten's ability to trudge through whatever she's going through. Like right now,
Is that, by whatever she's going through, do you mean my bullshit?
Yes, like right now she's doing so many things. She has to deal with Nicholas's bullshit, my extreme sweatiness. She has been throwing up and has a sick dog and another one in the hospital, and yet brings that cheery attitude. So sorry, Nicholas, but she's my favorite. She's so good.
There was never any doubt on my end. She's my favorite presenter too.
Resilient like a bug.
Yeah,
right. Yes.
Bug resilience, and I admire that.
Oh, that's so sweet, Becca. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. You're welcome. But Nicholas, you're great too. I'm just wailing on you for fun.
Yeah, I deserve it.
Mochi also came to say hi.
So, what is the most frustrating thing about entomology? What, did I miss something?
Oh, Mochi the cat came to say hi.
Oh, kitty.
Look at baby. Oh my god.
Is it named Mochi because of Big Hero 6?
Kind of. My niece did want that to be her nickname. Her full name is Mochaccino Tarantino Carapas Dachomes de la Llama. But we call her Mochi.
Of course.
But
But when you're mad, then you yell at her full name.
Yeah, exactly.
She's super cute. I love her. Love her.
Oh god, that's
She's
fantastic.
actually purring. She's sometimes is miserable and hates me, but now she's jealous of dogs. So
She looks like she's living the dream right now.
She
She's
is.
also so small.
mm-hmm.
She has such a little face.
Yeah, she's.
No,
Only
Kirsten's actually 6'4".
Yeah, huge.
She's actually a giant.
Yeah.
No, she's only she's not even quite 2 years old yet. So
Oh, so she did little.
she's
That little lady.
Little
Sorry
baby.
for this interruption brought to you by Mochi.
Is valid interruption.
Yeah,
So let's get less happy. What is the most frustrating thing about entomology? And I have an idea of what you're going to say, and it's probably not something that's legitimately frustrating, because my guess would be that you want to learn everything, but you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the most that's a great question. I think the most frustrating thing about entomology, there's a couple things. One, a lot of entomologists are arachnophobic.
Huh.
So that was an interesting thing that I wasn't expecting. And I kind of just assumed, I think, originally that all entomologists also liked arachnids, and it's not true. I think, if I recall this correctly, and this stat could be wrong, but at Entomological Society of America's meeting, they have this entomology games thing that they do, and they quiz different competing teams on entomology facts. And one of their last bonus round questions, they said that apparently I want to say 98% of entomologists are arachnophobic.
What in the world?
Yeah, and it blew my mind. I find that very frustrating because it's weird to me how you can appreciate insects and then you add that extra set of legs and you're out.
Right. Because there's a lot more creepy insects than arachnids, in my opinion. I prefer spiders over
I think
a lot of insects.
In many ways are often more scary than spiders ever are, but spiders get this terrible reputation, and apparently some entomologists perpetuate it. Of course, that's not all of them, but I just thought that was interesting. It was something that really surprised me when I got involved in this career. So I think the worst part about that is, as someone who wants to work with arachnids but still wants the entomology side of things, they're not actually really well joined together. They're kind of separate. Like, for example, arachnologists present at the American Arachnological Society of America's meeting, not the Entomological Society of America meeting. And so, like you said, I want to know everything and learn everything. It's hard to be part of both because that's a lot of time and effort. That's pretty frustrating. I think the other thing that's frustrating is there are a lot of scientists, not a lot of scientists, there are some scientists who put ego over good science and good research. That rubs me absolutely the wrong way. I don't think that ego has a very strong place in science. Of course, you should be proud of your work, but at the end of the day, it's not really about you. It's about the greater impact and the greater message of your research and making science accessible to everyone. So I have struggled working with some scientists who seem to value themselves more than the overall goal of research. So yeah, that can be hard too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question for you.
Oh, sorry. One more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Every time I say I like spiders, people are like, oh, you got bit by one. I've never been bit by a spider. And I understand why people want to ask me that question, but I will let you guys know when I get bit by a spider. It will probably be a big deal. So that kind of sucks too. Every time I talk about spiders, people's first reaction is like, you must have been bitten, or you don't know that you've been bitten. I get a lot of that. So that's been kind of sad.
Sorry, can I clarify? People are saying you own, like, a spider bites you and then you like them, like a weird Spider-Man sort of thing?
No, sorry.
Okay.
That's like a lot of people don't believe that I've never been bitten by a spider, or they assume that because I work with them, I've had to been bitten by spiders.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, and it's a little bit difficult, especially because most spiders are, like, less than 1% of spiders are medically significant to people.
Yeah.
And that issue is perpetuated a lot by, like, doctors saying that you've been bitten by a spider, and oftentimes that's actually incorrect. They'll just kind of slap blame onto a spider because it's easiest if they don't know what a bite is from, even if it is they don't often know that it is a bite. So they'll tell people, for example, in Pennsylvania that they've been bitten by brown recluses and they don't live there.
Oh, God.
Fantastic.
Right. And then when I try to explain to the general public, like, that's probably incorrect, they, of course, will take the doctor's advice over mine because they're the doctor. Not understanding that most doctors are not
a doctor of entomology.
Well, and they're not trained in identifying bites.
Right.
Because you really can't. For the majority of them, it's impossible. And so that's been something a little frustrating too, like trying to explain spiders and having to overcome the whole biting stereotype and problem is surprisingly difficult.
Right, because you have an inherent love for these animals, and people have an inherent, like, society has an inherent hatred for them. It's the same thing when I work with snakes, and the first question is, no matter what type of cool information I'm saying, you ever been bitten by a venomous snake?
Exactly.
No.
No.
No. Or I work with snapping turtles. How many times you been bit? Oh, you got all your fingers, so you must, it's like, stop. Like, that's not, like, these animals are so cool, they breathe through their butts. Like talk about that.
Right. And I understand people's curiosity. I don't mind addressing it. It's just, it seems very difficult to have what I say be taken seriously because they have, like, all this already a preconceived idea of it, and they're usually not, those people are very unopen to, like, changing their mind often. But that's not the majority of people I work with. I want to say that too. Most people who I talk about spiders with are very receptive to it. So I really enjoy working with people as a whole. It's just, it's sad to me, of course, because, like, when I show people spiders and they're like, kill it with fire, stomp on it, I'm going to burn your house down. Like, I wouldn't say that to you about your dog.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. I imagine that I understand.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. That you do not have to answer if you don't want to share your personal life, but I thought it would be a nice little engaging story. Do you want to share the story of your bug proposal?
Oh my God, I would love to talk about that. Yes.
Awesome. I love it so much. Like, I was crying watching this.
I was crying too. So my fiance and I have been together for over 5 years. And of course we've talked about marriage, but I kind of just assumed we wouldn't get married until I was done with grad school or something, just because grad school is stressful and time consuming. So I did not expect a proposal at all. I was completely clueless. Even when he presented me a box of bugs, I just thought he was like, you like bugs, so here. But what happened was we were at a winery with some friends, and he had made sure that like I was wearing something I really liked. I got my nails done, like all this stuff so casually through a friend that I did not pick up on any inkling that there would be a proposal. And when we got there, we went walking around looking for bugs. Everyone thought that all my friends convinced me that that's what we were doing. And I believe them because if you distract me with bugs, I will take that at face value. And I did. So we started walking around, and my one friend said he wanted to practice photography. So he wondered if I could just pose in this area with my friend. And we did. But what he was doing was prepping the lighting and stuff to be able to prepare for my fiance to propose. My fiance walked away. He came back with a box. There was painted lady butterflies inside. I opened it. I was playing with the butterflies. In hindsight, that seems very obvious what was going to happen, but it just didn't occur to me. And so I was playing with the butterflies.
Side note is like she's underselling it, because like I watched the video and she is so enthralled by these like butterflies. I think you're even like you're talking about like their proboscis or something like that, and like what the how they're like kind of like tasting you and whatnot, and just like breaking down the like anatomy of each one, and like all, like
friends who were there were asking me bug questions to keep me distracted, and again I cannot.
It was just like flawless. I mean, like you took that bait without a second thought.
Right. And that really speaks to my fiance too. Like he really knows and understands me. So I really wasn't prepared for it. I was hands deep in this box of butterflies. I think there was like 12 to 15 of them. I was talking about how they were lapping up the minerals from my sweat on my hands because we were outside in the summer. And then I turned around and my fiance was on one knee. And the funniest part is I was so blindsided by it. I ran and hugged him, and he had to tell me to stand up because he had to actually ask me because I said yes before he said anything. So it was really wonderful and very surprising. And the best part too is the ring itself actually has butterflies around the side.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. Literally like, no, I don't watch proposal things because I just don't care about it. This is like the most wholesome and sweet thing I have ever seen. Like it was it made my day. It was so fantastic. I was just like, oh my God, it was so perfect. It was I
can't. I mean, I think the world of him, but I can't speak highly enough of him. The fact that like I just feel so lucky to be with someone who understands me so well. Like he knew everything would work out perfectly because he knows that if you put a bug in front of me, there goes all my attention. Here I am.
Yeah.
That's it. And it doesn't matter. Like painted ladies, super common. Have I seen them thousands of times? Yeah. Does not matter.
Oh yeah. Nope.
Doesn't matter. So
he knows your passion and he used it to make that moment perfect.
And he gets
fantastic.
into my passions too. Like he actually has his own tarantula. And when we first started dating, like if I were working with the tarantulas, he'd be in a separate room and try to pretend he wasn't scared. But like he's in a separate room because he's afraid. And now he has his own. He gets all excited for our feeding days to watch his tarantula eat and grow. And he likes to advocate for insects and do outreach as well. Like just casually at work, he'll talk about like the benefits of insects and arachnids and getting rid of the stigma around them. So yeah, I just feel very fortunate. Thanks for asking. I love talking about that.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. I just wanted to share that with everyone. For everyone who's listening, that is like absolute couple goals. That's the type of stuff you should shoot for.
Yeah, I don't know how I found him, but yay.
Oh, hey, passion finds passion. So
yeah, that's true. So it's really wonderful. I'm very lucky.
Fantastic. Well, happy Valentine's Day to you guys, because that's the weekend we're recording right now.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Remember on Valentine's Day, we have an egg sack due. Oh, wait, maybe that wasn't the beginning of this. I forget if that was recorded. But we're having...
it might be. If it is, I'll put it in here where we're talking about my love life being worse than a tarantula's. But so I've got two more quick questions because we are right on the edge of our time limit here.
All right, go ahead.
But these two are good. So take as much time as you want to answer these, or make them really, really short and sweet.
Okay.
The first one is, what inspires you?
Bugs. I mean,
Yeah.
really,
Is there really any other answer?
I think what inspires me about insects so much, though, is I really like fighting for the underdog. As a very weird kid myself, I was bullied heavily. And also being an identical twin, I was compared a lot as a child to, I was the weird bug one. So everyone, I was a very easy target for bullying. But I think what's really nice about insects is that, like, I can fight for the underdog, and they're so important. And I can do that when maybe I didn't have that done exactly for me. I just really like advocating for them. I really love everything about insects, but yeah, I want to change that stigma, I think, more than anything. And it really inspires me when people look at insects and they're like, wait, maybe that wasn't what I thought. Maybe it is cooler than I thought. That will get me excited for weeks. Occasionally I get messages from people that are like, your account helped me with my arachnophobia. And now I have my own pet tarantula. And I promise you, every time I get a message like that, I actually cry. It makes me so happy. So that's a huge part of it too. Just working with the public in general. I really, really love that.
Well, everyone who ever bullied you or compared you to somebody else, they are now eating your words because you are just an absolutely fantastic scientist and science communicator, and you're doing insanely beneficial work for conservation and just, I guess, bugs in general. So you should be proud of that.
Well, thank you. It means a lot.
And then the last one, before we wrap up this episode, is if you could change one thing about the world, what would it be? I know that's heavy.
One thing. I think if I could
or I guess like a line of things.
I think I would change the way that humans view themselves in terms of nature. We view ourselves as separate, and we are absolutely a part of it. There is no world where we're separate from nature. And so I think if I could change anything, I would change the way we interact with the world around us, and our understanding of how integral we are in that world.
I don't think that any sarcastic comment or rebuttal to that was going to just... I don't want to take away from what you just said, because I think that's an insanely important piece that you just spoke. And I think we should probably just end the episode and let people marinate on what you just said, because I think that's a good summary of everything that we've been talking about throughout this episode. So, Becca, thank you so much for joining us again. I always look forward to talking with you for an insanely long period of time. This episode is very long. We might release it in 2 episodes. Doesn't matter. I think that anybody listening is going to be so enthralled that they don't care what the length is.
Aww.
And yeah, thank you again just so much for being here, and best of luck to you in all of your ongoing endeavors and anything. Is there anything you want to plug or say before we end?
Well, in case of life updates, what I'm currently doing right now is looking at grad school. So hopefully there will be an update on that soon. I'm looking at a couple different programs where I can work on spiders directly, which is really exciting. So finally get my feet wet in spider research, because I actually haven't done that directly aside from my own endeavors. Please feel free to follow me on social media. I'm finally getting back more into that again as I get a new phone. My camera has been broken for a long time now, so that's kind of why I've been MIA. I can't produce new content, so a lot of the stuff I have is just old. But unless I steal my fiance's phone, which I feel bad about doing all the time. But
right.
Yeah. So if you want to follow me on TikTok or Instagram, Bug Girl Becca, you can learn more there, or you can ask me any questions about getting started in entomology. I would be happy to point you in the right direction. Please, if you're young or any age and you want to be an entomologist, don't think that you're burdening me by reaching out. I want to help the next entomology generation, so I want to help you.
God, do scientists get any better? So yeah, go follow Becca, give her all of your support. I'm confident that there will be absolutely no issue for you getting into your field of passion and working with tarantulas. I'm excited for that inevitable update. And yeah, I think that about covers it. So again, thank you for joining us, and bye, nerds.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, guys.
Sweet.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Anthropocene.
Be sure to follow us on all social media and feel free to reach out to us with any comments, corrections, or suggestions for future episodes or species you'd like to see us cover.
Oh, what we have. I mean, it's not terribly cold out here. It's just my bug room is so much hotter. But I like doing all my meetings in here. But then I'm like,
Yeah, whatever. You live the lifestyle that you love.
swamp woman. Yes.